Batista in the mid-2000s was absolute peak. Bro was having wars with the likes of Taker, Edge, Cena, and Triple H. He even dabbled in the tag division, winning the titles alongside one of his best friends, Rey Mysterio. And you can honestly say Batista was WWE's John Cena before John Cena. After successfully defeating Triple H at WrestleMania 21, Batista was basically a made man. WWE went for the long slow burn that saw Batista slowly but surely realize the game was only in it for himself, which the fans couldn't get enough of. Literally from the moment Batista put his thumb down in that infamous segment, he was a star, and it did nothing but help that bro can actually wrestle. After a decent in-ring affair at Mania 21, Triple H demanded his rematch, which took place the next month in a Hell in a Cell. And this shut up whatever very few Batista haters there were. The animal proved he wasn't some WWE project being forced down throats and showed everyone he was here to stay. And after a very violent match, ending with a Batista bomb, Batista would retain his title. After retaining his title and being drafted to SmackDown, that opened up a lot of possible different rivalries, as SmackDown had a completely different batch of wrestlers than Raw. Batista's first feud on the Blue brand would be against JBL, and JBL around this time was pretty much in the peak of his career, as he was freshly coming off a WWE title reign that lasted over a year. Batista and JBL would go on to have 3 different matches, with 2 of them being on pay-per-view. The first match would happen at Armageddon, which Batista ended up winning in a 20-minute match that ended in DQ. So yeah, I'm sure you could assume it was pretty bad, which is probably why higher-ups decided to run it back the next month at SummerSlam. But this time, it was a no-holds-barred match. And although you could say this was the usual basic brawl of a match, it was pretty entertaining. The immediate brawling while Batista's pyro was still on and the spear through the barricade caught me pretty off guard, as the reviews online say the match was mid and boring, which I don't really see. These boys did their thing, and it ultimately ended after an insane looking Batista bomb on the steel steps. They would also have a bull rope match the next month on SmackDown, but like their first affair, that wasn't that good. The Animal's next program would be with none other than Eddie Guerrero. After having a decent match with Eddie at No Mercy, the two would actually start tag teaming, going up against teams like Mr. Kennedy and Randy Orton and Eminem, until Eddie tragically passed away the next month, which caused Eddie's best friend Ray to take his place and team up with Batista in memory of Eddie, which the two would beat Eminem for the tag titles, making Batista a double champ. They would drop the titles back to Eminem a few weeks later in a steel cage, but this was still a great moment. Unfortunately though, great things only last for so long. The next week on SmackDown, Batista would relinquish the world title due to injury, which kept him out for 6 months. When he returned a few months later, he would pretty much immediately be slotted into the world title picture, as he never did lose the title. And after a pretty wacky feud with King Booker that saw 2 matches on pay-per-view, Batista would finally reclaim the title he never lost, which now meant it was time for Batista's best feud yet, which was against The Undertaker, who at this time was already a 15-year veteran, so fans were quite hyped when it was time for Batista vs. The Undertaker on the biggest stage possible, being WrestleMania, where the two showed up and showed out, and once again another great match by Batista. After bringing out all the classics, including a dive outside, a last ride, and a tombstone, The Undertaker beat Batista to win the world title. But that wasn't the end for the Animal. The next month at Backlash, Batista and Taker would run it back, but this time it was in a last man standing match, and after some crazy spots, like a leg drop through a table and a spear off the damn stage, Taker vs Batista 2 would end in a draw, which pretty much set up a third match between the two, which took place on SmackDown in a steel cage. And it ended in a pretty memorable draw after both men escaped at the same time, leading to Undertaker being cashed in on by Edge. After winning Rivalry of the Year alongside Taker, Batista, for I'd say the first time in his career, would get stuck in a pretty bad limbo, as he had back-to-back stinker rivalries with both Edge and the Great Khali, especially the Great Khali. I mean, just look at this. With Batista slowly running out of good people to wrestle on the Blue brand, it was time for him to finally make the jump. As for the first time in over 3 years, Batista would get drafted to Monday Night Raw. And with both Cena and Batista on the same brand, it was only inevitable for them to clash, which they immediately did at SummerSlam. Which didn't really go to plan, as John Cena unfortunately broke his neck in this match. For the next few years, Batista would remain a main eventer, even running it back with Cena a few years later, beating him to become the WWE Champion, until dropping it back to Cena in an I Quit match, which then led to the Animal quitting and leaving the wrestling industry for a career in Hollywood, further solidifying how big of a star he truly was.